It all starts on a scorching summer day inside that bus, where the heat is so thick it feels like a real sauna. Suddenly, people saw the train take a wild wrong turn, and something weird popped out in front of them, making everyone wonder if they were just watching a movie. Since that creature looked so real, even standing out too much inside the train, what they saw was nothing less than a goblin, turning an ordinary day into true hell as monsters poured out and began killing everyone on the bus one by one without mercy. Even those who lunged to grab their phones and scream for the police. The people who shouted for help were killed on the spot. It was all thanks to a quick and cruel blow that hit them before they could even figure out what was going on. The loud screams of the crowd made the others waiting for their turn even more scared. The protagonist knew he couldn't stop shaking because everyone on that bus was about to die, turning the whole place into a deadly slaughterhouse where men, women, and children alike were just waiting targets. And so, more than 4 out of every 5 people in Sioux were fated to die. The protagonist couldn't help but wonder if he'd actually make it through this mess. Sadly, he was just an ordinary player in that world, forced to fight harder than anyone else only to meet his end. Even in the busy city of Genoga, Sioux back in 2028, folks were just going about their normal days. 2 of them were giggling about how badly they did on their recent exams. They feared that failing now would mean repeating the year and missing their chance to move on to the next class. Among the crowd stood our hero, Kim Kep-chin, a 30-year-old man who had already spent 7 years failing the same test to become a civil commander and was now studying to try again. Once a boy with no talent who gave up his dream to pass the civil service exam, he now sits in a lunch break listening to colleagues marvel at a legendary player named Waktaeun, known as God Taeyeon, while wondering how amazing he would be if he could even match just a fraction of his skill. In the meantime, ordinary folks like them could only scrape by doing honest work as civil servants, grinding away just to put food on the table. Suddenly, they started talking about how Haechin used to be a legendary player who, despite scoring the lowest on his talent test and finishing last, was known as the dead genius for discovering his gift too late to ever get the recognition he deserved, which was a real shame. They explained that extra tests uncovered his hidden sealed gifts. They had to work incredibly hard to unlock all these powers across many tests, which seemed like a gift to fix his lost time, but it was all for nothing in a funny twist since most people find their talent in their early 20s. Yet Shin, who was different, couldn't unlock his power the normal way and didn't even wake up until he was 30. Everyone could plainly see that Hyukin was just another person with no future ahead of him. But the protagonist was certain he already knew this truth. He always knew he should never have dreamed of becoming a player. He remembers just how things were 7 years ago. Thinking it was his final shot at becoming a player, he took the government's talent exam only to find out he had just one ability and no real gift for being a player. In the end, he was left with just one active talent, a result so terrible he'd rather never have had any at all. But back then, he didn't know any better. He never thought the head of the players group would bother showing up just to hand over his results. That was because Hukshin had only gone to a regular school, and his resume had nothing special to it. He had hoped to become a civil hunter's assistant, but he just kept failing over and over again. The life of a talented player and that of an ordinary person were as different as heaven and hell, with famous athletes getting all the attention and interviews while regular folks were left in shadows. All because they stumbled upon treasures deep within the dungeons they dared to explore. They strutted around with unshakable confidence, treating them like kings, while ordinary folks like Hukshin, who lacked any special gift, were dismissed as barely worth a glance. That disappointment over not making the team was actually a rare gift Hyukin could never have dreamed of, so he turned back home to study hard and take the civil service exams. He had stopped caring about what lay ahead because life had become so messy and hopeless ever since the big disaster on April 27, 2018. Since that time, endless terrible things began with a thick fog and a dark spirit that killed 145,000 out of the 150,000 people who joined. By the end, Jangnoga was almost completely wiped out, a terrifying scene that left even the reporters frozen in shock, while the legendary player Miss Sang Yen, who rose to fame a decade after the great disaster by becoming a world-renowned figure who gives regular interviews, confidently declared in one that after years in the field, he had learned that hard work beats talent and urged everyone to watch him grow stronger. Kakshin wonders if hard work alone could truly push someone to that level, or if his own efforts just weren't enough to get him there. The protagonist sighed and told himself he shouldn't waste time on pointless thoughts, knowing there was no reason to chase impossible dreams anymore. Hishin wonders that if he had just a spark of talent, he might have awakened as a true player and found a guardian to help him build his own fortune. Hukshin can't believe that, even after all these years, he still has a tiny bit of hope left. But in the end, everything turned into a mess because of him. The truth was that his mother had passed away from a sickness of her own. He wondered how his sister landed a job at a chip factory to get them out of poverty, only for her to later develop leukemia, and he felt terrible because so much of this was his fault. Fiction believed that even if he could win for his family, he was still just a nobody with no talent, no money, and no real worth. He failed the civil service exams over and over without anyone knowing what he did wrong. And after getting attention just for being terrible at everything, he finally wondered when his life had started to fall apart, even though he always thought he gave his best, only to realize in the end that he hadn't, leaving him to ask if trying harder would have changed anything and wondering what he should even do if things stayed this way forever. After thinking about all that, Hakshin felt really alone. With that in mind, he climbed into bed and drifted off to sleep that night. The next morning, Chin opened his eyes and had no idea what time it was. And then he remembered that today was the day of the midterm evaluation. Even though he had gone to bed early, he still woke up late, took a shower before leaving, and wondered what time the evaluation would happen. So he decided to head out for his usual exam. But as he walked, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. When the bus finally pulled up at the station, Chin was still feeling that nagging discomfort. Something felt totally strange that day, even though he had no idea why. He hopped on the bus, convinced he was worrying too much, and decided to just focus on reading his notes for the upcoming test. Yukin then started studying for the exam, just like 10 years ago in Jinogu, which marked the beginning of the cataclysm. He overheard the chatter around him as folks talked about silly things like the weather and famous stars. As the team studied the killer, something strange happened. The people on the bus suddenly saw a thick fog rolling in and spreading fast. They stood frozen, staring into a wall of thick fog that blocked out the outside world with no warning at all. And then, a terrible, weird smell started to fill the air. Chin saw a scary emergency text warning him that a huge disaster was about to happen. They said a thick fog rolled in over Jongnoga that day. On April 27, 2018, with chaos still raging, everyone was told to drive slowly and stay safe. At last, the hero understood the truth. He hadn't just woken up, he had traveled back in time. He suddenly found himself 10 years in the past. His gut feeling of dread came from having already lived through that day before. The terrible events of that day were playing out exactly as they had 10 years before. That realization struck him. The entire land of Jongnogu, even the Guang woman, was in danger of being swallowed whole by the dark fog and the terrible things it brought. If that was real, the bus ride to Jangnu could have been his last, since nearly everyone from Jongnuva died, and Touch realized he had returned to the past with full knowledge of what was to come. Everything began to unravel until it led back to the past he knew. And then suddenly, a strange game window popped up in his vision, ordering players to get ready and leaving him completely confused. The screen announced that the tutorial was about to begin, the same event from 10 years ago when monsters surged out of the dungeons that opened all across the world. Countless monsters spilled out from them and slaughtered people without a chance to fight, claiming nearly 150,000 lives in Zhong'o and leaving only 3% to survive during the week of the cataclysm, which became known as the worst day in human history. But after that event, the beings called players finally appeared in the world. With swift and steady hands, they brought down the monsters and slowly cleared the dangerous dungeons of Jono. Throughout history, players have fought in huge battles to stop invasions for various dungeons. They recorded sounds to build virtual dungeons for players to explore. So, the world started to heal and rebuild after the great disaster, and the hero watched every old dungeon recording he had saved in his head. He kept running through those virtual dungeons over and over again, fueled by his love for games and his dream of becoming a player. Even though he never became a real player, Hyukin memorized every useless dungeon raid and ran them over and over until he knew everything, showing in those moments that he was the best player in the world, even if that glory was only inside the game. Back in the present, the tutorial was about to start and the system window told everyone to get ready. Hakshin knew those notifications would show up during the cataclysm, and while he'd only ever heard about them in stories, seeing them happen right before his eyes was nothing like he had imagined. Suddenly, the bus slammed into something, shaking everyone inside and making them worry about what invisible danger was outside, while Chin tried to keep his cool. Those were things that had been promised long ago and had already come to pass. The protagonist realized no one else on the bus had heard the tutorial alert, meaning he was all alone and had to survive by using every trick he knew and thinking carefully before acting. The system warns them to watch their every move because the mysterious nameless observer is finally noticing them. Infection realizes this watcher used to be a guardian who is now offering the protagonist a special bonus meant only for the famous and powerful, leaving him completely confused. The guardians, who watched down from above, decided a player's fate by giving them special gifts and favors. Guardians were beings from a higher dimension who only used nicknames when talking to players. So when the system gave Kukshin the serene eye of the observer as a bonus, he felt strangely calm and impartial, as if someone was watching him from a distance. The system announces the quest is starting in 10 seconds, and the countdown begins, but the driver warns that the fog is too thick to drive, and they must find another way, surprising the protagonist as the chaos arrives faster than expected, while complaining passengers grumble about the terrible morning and being late, only for Hyukin to shout at them to stay put, because leaving is their only chance to survive. The system shuts down the nameless watcher's interest in him once more. But everyone keeps their eyes on the street, just as a brilliant flash of light suddenly pops into view. It's nothing less than a tiny door popping open to release a being. They call it an intermediate administrator. Sia, the administrator, waves hello to everyone nearby, introduces herself, and explains that you are all now inside her tutorial. The tutorial quest tells players to survive in the field for 7 days. They couldn't leave that space, so the system would explain the next challenge based on how many survivors were left. The regular folks are totally lost and keep asking Senior if this is just a movie recording, demanding to know what's really going on. The Senior tells us that we have to find our own strength to make it through the tutorial quest. Suddenly, a bloody corpse drops right in front of the bus, freezing everyone in shock as red blood splatters across the window. Hakshin understood that killing ordinary people to spread fear was just part of their plan. The system warns that screams and movement have been detected as goblin troops start emerging from this new world. As soon as the first goblin lunged forward, the army surged after it to storm into the Jongun district. The passengers scream in terror as dark shadows creep closer to the bus. Strange shapes started to gather and climb over them. The passengers panic and want to flee, but the protagonist screams at them to stay inside, because opening the door would invite a deadly goblin attack outside. Yet he knows that even with 10 years of human survival tricks, everyone's chances of living still feel very slim. The only way to survive a goblin attack was to walk right into certain death, yet knowing how to do it meant nothing without the strength to actually face those creatures. So Kakachin knew he couldn't try that deadly lesson just yet. The goblins were so much stronger than people that they would soon smash right through the bus to charge at them. As the door shatters and screams fill the air, Kyukshin shouts for everyone to drop low and stay still, knowing his terrified and confused passengers might not obey, but he insists they listen to him now or they won't survive. Nobody understood his words, but they just wanted to know if they needed to stay inside while chaos raged outside, and their only hope was to find a way to escape fast. Fekshin knew there was no time left to even think about that. The invisible watcher's intense gaze sparked a status window and inventory panel, leaving the hero shocked to find he started with 11 points instead of the usual 9. The passengers screamed once more as the goblins started smashing the windows to get inside. Soon, one of them was stabbed by a goblin's weapon while still screaming for help. Chaos erupted inside the bus, so Hyukin flopped onto the floor among the bodies, using the bedabbiness to stay calm, a trick that worked perfectly. The protagonist realized that even inside the safe zone during the tutorial, there were still rules to survive. One of them was inside the bus to meet safety rules, and to stay alive, he had to keep his cool. Hai-Chin was terrified that even a small move could ruin his escape, yet he managed to stay so calm the goblin missed him, and he figured the Guardian's bonus had saved his skin. Even though he had no idea why he got the bonus, he used it to keep going. He thought his future knowledge meant the first wave of attacks would keep coming for 10 long minutes before finally ending just a few moments later. He just had to hold on a bit longer, staying as still as he could even while the goblins touched him and made it hard for Hyukin to stay calm, because every second counted. The system buzzed to say that the brave Lion King had offered Hyukin a chance, catching the protagonist off guard, since it was a different Guardian who decided to help him. The Guardian decided to hand him a powerful potion that could change everything. The Guardian handed it over with excitement, eager to see just how far Hyukin's bravery could still carry him. The elixir was a gift that gave him 6 extra points of strength for 10 minutes. And Hai realized he'd already received several such gifts just during the tutorial. When a player leveled up, they received a status boost, and drinking that elixir was like gaining 3 levels of physical strength instantly. Knowing this, Gashin felt ready to face the goblins, confident the elixir gave him enough power to defeat them. Tekken realized that the Guardian who gave him the magic drink likely wanted to watch him battle. He risked his courage and fumed inwardly, angry that the Guardians acted so arrogantly by demanding he just say yes. Geekshan knew the raid would end in just a few seconds. The lion survived without taking any big risks before a brave one stepped forward to negotiate with the middle manager, promising to change the training grounds exactly as the Guardians asked. Hyukin saw that the Guardian was doing anything he could to force him into a fight. The brave Lion King was the most notorious Guardian, drawn to wild bravery, daring challenges, and the fiery passion of players. The Guardian was twisted and loved seeing players suffer in pain while facing adversity, finding their foolish bravery entertaining. And the protagonist knew the brave Lion King wanted to completely remove the safe zone. Senia told us the deal with the Guardian was done, and the safe zone would shut down in just 30 seconds. Then they pointed out that if a tutor forces a change on the player, that player must get a reward, especially since they were just trying to make him stay quiet and settle for a simple strength potion. He said SA had no choice but to follow the rules, especially when his life was on the line. It shocked the administrator that ignoring the commandments was wrong, and the nameless observer was just as amazed, while the brave Lion King stayed quiet. Senna questioned the rules he'd mentioned, but the protagonist called it a silly mistake, pointing out that nobody expected those laws until 7 years after the tutorial even began. Senna asked Howen how he knew the commandments, but Howen turned the answer away, saying it didn't matter. After all, the player didn't need to teach anyone how to play, and that quieted her down. The hero also noted that 10 seconds of his time in the safe zone were already lost to their conversation. She must find a way to make up for the time they lost, and Sinian nods to Cookin, agreeing he was right. Following the rules, she gives him 10 more seconds of safety and offers him a special reward to match the new situation. Chin got a special oil that could make his blades razor sharp or help him in other tricky jobs. He also got a rusty steel sword that wasn't very deadly, but it could deal between 2 and 5 points of damage. The protagonist stopped complaining and felt at least a little satisfied now that he had finally gotten something. All because he spoke of the rules. By the time he comes back, the goblin attack has ended and everyone steps off the bus. Thanks to that talk, he found a safe zone so easy to use that he walked right past the monsters without ever having to fight. The system warns that the brave Lion King is sad, but the hero doesn't even care. He finally sees all the passengers lying on the ground, and he nearly vomits. He forced himself to stay strong and calm, knowing that to survive the brutal tutorial week, he had to go out and find water and food. So the protagonist hops off the bus and heads straight for the convenience store just 300 meters away, making it his top priority. Chin knew it all too well, having spent 3 years studying that very spot. He knew this place inside and out, but with so little time left, he had to rush or risk getting caught with no way to defend himself, all while a man screamed for help near some injured people nearby. He needed help, and even though Hyukin knew they were out there, the fog hid them from view, so Hyuk-Chin used the bus as his only guide, but with bodies scattered everywhere and detours blocking the way, he wondered if his calm was just a trick of his guardian's bonus, until he suddenly screamed when an arm reached out from under the car. He nearly thinks it's just another dead body until he hears a voice begging for help. Gekshin spots a survivor and walks over to see them up close. On the other side of the car, another goblin is also lying underneath. It seems a mistake left the soldier stuck even after the retreat order, and now a goblin is laughing as he prepares to kill the trapped woman. She pleads with Fiction to save her from death, desperate to see her mother one last time before it's too late. Fiction finally sees the child is begging for her life, realizing she wasn't hurt by the goblin's attack on her legs, but was screaming in fear instead of pain because she had a special bonus like Heiken, and the goblin was so focused on killing her that it didn't notice her survival. The protagonist wondered if that was just what people call the player's talent. Just then, the administrator walked up and revealed it was actually a baby goblin, yet even a level 1 should struggle to defeat such a creature so easily. Kakwin saw that if Senna was telling the truth, his feat was truly amazing. After all, the child was so terrified she couldn't even understand what was going on, but she actually had a powerful ability that worked like a tank. Even the first king couldn't have handled things like Yuan, who realizes that if he doesn't act now, more goblins will arrive and she will be lost. The hero clicks open his inventory to pull out his sword. Though he knew the fields well, that knowledge felt useless in this virtual world, so he decided to pull out his rusty iron sword. Even though the administrator said it was just a baby goblin, fighting the monster alone could still change everything. If Hyukin could use that to his advantage, he could strike the goblin's weak spot while it was distracted, especially since one of them wasn't even fighting back. Thinking fast, the hero crept up from behind and knocked out the monster in one hit to earn his reward, then told the child to get up. She needed to pack her things, or she'd be left behind if she didn't follow him. She decided to get up, do what he said, and follow him down the streets. They stepped into a shop where Hyukin grabbed her arm and begged her not to open those doors, but she just stood there confused and silent. He pressed her to confirm she understood because she stayed quiet, so she nodded. Hutchin wondered if fear had taken hold. which made perfect sense given that it would have been strange if she hadn't felt it from the very start. Even though he felt her holding back, he knew there were other things that had to be done. The system warned that 200 waves of goblins were about to start, so it was time to build safe zones for the players. Jackson asked if the girl could see the system, and she said yes. Safe places like schools, convenience stores, and hospitals became the only spots where people could feel safe. He realized he was right. She was a master player with huge potential. Usually only talented players could spot hospitals as safe zones during the second attack, but Caction saw them too, which was strange and made him wonder if there were even more secret safe spots hidden away. Hukshin put his confusion aside to keep them safe just as the system announced the second wave of goblins was beginning. He told her not to open the door because she wasn't brave enough to do anything and should just stay seated away from it. Now that the system has cleared the way, a thick, ancient fog started to roll in around the safe zones. Just as the goblins began to creep around outside, people kept trying to fight them with weapons, but every single one of them was quickly and brutally killed by the monsters. Others saw the nearby convenience stores and sprinted toward them. They begged to be let out before the new chaos claimed them all. Piction stood frozen, ignoring the crowd's angry shouts for him to open the door. He thought he felt nothing at first, but watching the goblins appear outside and slash down the people begging for help was so painful it felt like his heart was being torn apart. You couldn't force your way in, and the instant you opened the door from the inside, the safe zone would vanish right before your eyes. Kit and the girl might have died inside if they had tried to save others. He stored every detail in his mind. The ancient system the god had started and the guards who watched the bloodshed like it was just a big game. He planned to pay back everyone who lost so much and suffered. 6 hours later, after the second wave had passed, the air felt a little less tense. The girl thanked Yukshin, admitting she couldn't have done anything or even said hello earlier. So she introduced herself as Kong Suinhua. Su told him she was glad to have met him, but he quickly cut her off to say he hadn't done anything worthy of thanks now that everything was over. Kukshin admitted he might have to use her as bait if things went wrong, which made her feel desperate and scared he'd toss her aside, so she asked if she had done something wrong to make him choose such a path. The protagonist deliberately chose cold words, but Chin clarified he only meant he couldn't promise her safety until the tutorial ended, noting that staying alive on his own was already a struggle. He promised he wouldn't give her up while he was still safe, and then he told her to rest until they found a way out by morning. Sanwa wondered where they would be heading the next day. Hen stared at the system window, listing the safe zones, noting one new area on the second floor of the Park Tower's garage, and replied that they were heading to Guangwoman since the girl likely couldn't see these extra spots yet. Though even he had never heard of them before, he still knew one thing. That's why the Guangwoman Tower was the key to turning things around in that tutorial. As the sun rose, the two of them walked out of the convenience store. Kitchen gently asks if you're okay after seeing the dead bodies, and you nod in agreement. But the protagonist isn't sure she's really okay, because that brutal sight was too much for a girl like her, and she's probably just pretending to be tough while walking through a ruined city, which leaves him surprised. Bodies littered the ground, and not one person had been found alive. Chin warns Suinhua to stay sharp and report any strange, jelly-like things she sees sliding on the floor, leaving the girl completely baffled by his strange warning. Soon they spot the very creature he described, a wobbly slime. Hukshin was shocked to meet them so soon, since these neutral monsters hid their true strength and were easy enough for even small kids to beat. Hukshin strikes the slime down with his sword, gaining experience and 3 coins in a surprise moment that fills him with an odd sense of nostalgia, despite it being his very first time wielding the blade. Samu was shocked that the slime vanished after being hit, so he explained that while those were weak monsters, they kept appearing along the way and they should stop to kill them whenever possible, which meant she had to stay alert whenever she saw one on the ground. And though she agreed to help spot them, Kaiken found it strange because everything felt too easy. He had only ever swung swords inside virtual dungeons, so he expected using one in the real world to feel completely different. He held the blade as if he had always been a swordsman, his hand knowing its weight perfectly from the very start. Su keeps guiding the protagonist to slimes, and he keeps killing them, making the one he just defeated the 5th monster, leaving him surprised that Samu is so good at finding them. As Hikshin keeps slicing through the slimes, he finally reaches level 2 and gets 2 bonus stat points plus 1 random point. Su stares in shock and wonders what made his body start glowing like that. Chen replies that he leveled up because killing monsters makes him stronger, so he promises to do his best to get stronger too. But honestly, Hyukin was just getting his first level up too. Even so, for some reason, he always felt like the sword was an old friend the moment he held it. By the time it was over, he kept slaying monsters until he hit level 3, snagging 2 extra bonus points and 1 more random one. The hero feels like he's leveling up fast, and those surprise stat points are making him very curious. It was the second time he'd gotten them. That's because the first king, Suyu Hyan, was known as the great teacher who showed others how to finish a task. The old writing said these random stat boosts had always been there, and even though he searched for a long time, Hukshin had already found 2 of them. He recalls how he used to fail those tests because he had no talent, which now makes him wonder if he suddenly found a new ability after going back in time. He wasn't sure if he'd actually been useless all that time, but if he hadn't gotten stronger, he knew it must mean a player had awakened a power that only showed its growth right at the start, making it just a possibility. Everything worked out perfectly for him, letting him survive and reach level 3. Because of this, the Guardians watching awarded him more interest points, and if Huan truly was an awakened player, he had a real shot at reaching his big goal after surviving the tutorial. In 3 years, a magic potion that cures sickness will finally hit the store shelves. It would cost about $1 billion, so if he could somehow gather that much money by then, he could use the potion to heal his mother, which meant he had to keep surviving and saving for a long time. While walking toward Gwangwoman Tower, Suinhwa and Hyukin kept slaying slimes along the way. He made it to level 5, where every turn gave him 2 bonus points and 1 random surprise that always made him gasp when he checked the screen again. That's when he stumbled upon something even bigger in the system that caught his eye. They called a party, and once he hit level 5, he used it to drag someone into his group. She officially joined his team, meaning they could now share their hard-earned experiences and were both amazed by the new features the system revealed. The nameless guardian watched Hyukshin with interest, but the protagonist ignored him while she promised to work hard and stay useful, begging him not to leave her. Hyukshin worried she was terrified of being left behind, so even though he felt bad for her, he told her he'd only follow her if she could prove it with what she did, not just what she said. Even with quick leveling and plenty of random bonus stats, that guy was still waiting for them on the first floor of the Gwangwoman Tower. Kikshin worried he might not be strong enough to keep Samo safe when he fought him. It was pretty silly to think anyone at level 5 could keep the people around them safe. Just then, Samo spoke up, pointed at a strange thing ahead, and asked if we'd stumbled onto a new kind of monster. The system revealed the creature was a level 3 city fox, a neutral monster that hung back with its pack to strike at anyone who threatened them, so they had to sneak past it without making a sound. That's when Samuel realized she could use a skill called Taunt, not knowing it would draw the attention of several foxes straight to her. Hushin helped her and saw that Samuel was taking little damage even as the foxes rushed to kill them. So he had to strike their necks to bring them down, and after he took out several of the city foxes and asked if she was hurt, the system announced he had leveled up many times and reached level 8. Just then, the administrator walked up and asked what level he was on. Hakshan thought it strange that Senna cared about his level 8 rank and told her so, only for her to doubt him until he suggested she just scan him to check. The administrator knew he wasn't lying, and the nameless guardian was shocked to see how quickly he was growing stronger while other anonymous guardians looked on in awe at Hakshan. The protagonist knew his rapid leveling was too strange to ignore, so he opened the status window to check what was happening. Usually, a level 8 player wouldn't have points that high. It was obvious his growth was different, but he turned that into a real advantage for himself. Kayakin said they were going into the tower where a dungeon waited, so he would tell Sunway what to do once they were inside. If she didn't follow the plan, she would certainly die, and some were surprised by his words. But she didn't need to be scared, just follow his instructions. Tukshin and Samwa worked together to kill a few more city foxes, and in the process, Tukshin found a pair of worn iron gauntlets. He quickly passed the item right to SWA. With everything ready for the climb up the dungeon tower, Kyukshin said it was time to just follow the plan and go in right now. As they neared the tower, the system warned that no one under level 5 could enter the dungeon. When they finally arrived at the dark doorway, she paused and asked if they were truly ready to step into the dungeon. Shin said yes, and then the two of them walked in together. They soon saw monsters inside who instantly noticed them. Yakshin asked if anyone remembered their task, and they nodded. The hero broke up with Samwa and sent her to face the goblins first, so they could split up and take out the monsters hiding inside the dungeon. He realized that unlike the Deadly Hide dungeon, where every monster attacked anyone who entered, this D-rank tower had goblins that were hostile and city wolves that were neutral. If they just killed the goblins first, the city wolves would never attack. As it happened, the protagonist was blown away by Suinhwa, who looked like a genius at taming those creatures and fighting back with amazing skill. The goblins' attacks couldn't even touch her, proving she was a far better player than he had ever imagined. Once a few were done, Hushin praised her hard work and told her to take a quick break to rest. He figured the mini-bosses would pop up soon, since they usually waited until the weaker monsters nearby were gone. Yukin says that if someone had caught their breath, they'd be ready to hunt down the remaining monsters. She nods in agreement before setting off to care for the foxes from the neutral city. Only a handful of monsters remained to be slain. Just then, the system let out a sudden announcement that the pause had started. The Nameless Watcher, the brave Lion King, and the Silent Guardians all stood on the edge of their seats, eyes wide with excitement as they stared at Kipchin. Someone began talking to Kipchin, and he realized that a pause had frozen the entire world, making him wonder if that was the great power of the administrator who could temporarily stop everything in the field. Senna rushes up to him, questioning if he's lost his mind, even though she just used a pricey item to freeze time, while Kipchin just acts like he doesn't get what she's saying. Senna points out that he's been acting like he knew everything up until now and asks if even this was part of his plan, and when the protagonist admits he's not sure, the administrator calls the whole thing foolish. After all, the little boss he was trying to summon on that floor was just a level 13 goblin soldier that got a huge power boost just for showing up. He wasn't a match for Kipchin, who could even handle a level 8 player while only bringing one backup. Cinia asks again why he'd choose a fight he couldn't win, but Kipchin thinks she didn't want him to die, while the protagonist sees it all as a lie from an administrator who clearly has a strong interest in him. Just as Cinia had warned, he played like he could see the future, proving himself a rare gem destined to put on a legendary show for the Guardians. That's why the administrator likely wanted Hubin to live instead of dying there, because it must be important that the protagonist never heard of her in the future. Cinia couldn't possibly have a good reason for showing interest, and he even joked that she must just be clumsy when it comes to making up excuses. It was bad enough that he was pushed aside as an intermediate administrator, especially right before the dungeon events made him famous. That's likely why no one ever heard of her again, even though Cinia thinks Hyukin is insulting her and the hero insists he's just telling the truth, since she did waste their time by letting things play out this way. If she wants to find something thrilling for the Guardians to watch, he suggests an idea and then explains that he won't be able to defeat the goblin soldier. Later, he stepped in to handle a monster all by himself, even when she said it couldn't happen, while Cinia wondered if they really meant to hunt down the goblin soldier. Kipchin asked her to think about it more carefully before deciding. How could a level 8 player defeat a mini-boss? Of course, saying that out loud would only drive the Guardians crazy, but after thinking it over, Senna could become a capable intermediate administrator who could give the Guardians a good show to watch in exchange for the hints he was offering to stir her audience's interest. Huchuan wanted her to make a deal with him. The administrator saw his recklessness knew no bounds, so she called upon her powers as her patience ran out. But Huchin argues that if she truly meant to kill him, she would have done it ages ago. He wonders if tossing him aside after giving him a chance would be a waste, since she has nothing to lose by making a deal with him right now. She asks what kind of deal he had in mind. While someone else takes down monsters and gains strength, the girl spins around to tell the protagonist she's finished cleaning up every beast exactly as planned. Huchin urges her to step closer, just as the system confirms that every monster has been wiped out. The Goblin Soldier mini-boss was ready to appear because all the conditions were met. A Goblin mini-boss shows up on that floor with other monsters, claiming the area as its new battleground. He hides with someone and whispers for her to duck her head. Thinking it was crazy to ever face that creature, the goblins immediately went wild on their own at the sight of the intruders. The hero realizes the best way to take down a goblin soldier is to wait and force it to waste its strongest move. This move was called Spear Throw. First they had to dodge the attack without getting hit. Then after the goblin tried to strike while they hid, Chin decided they'd start killing and followed him to hunt the goblin boss. He told Seiya to watch closely as a simple level 8 player took on a mini-boss with his own bare hands. The level 13 goblin soldier spotted them and got ready to hunt the players. The hero figured this predictable response from a mini-boss felt nothing like the crushing pressure the other monsters had. After missing a deadly spear throw at the start of the fight, the goblin soldier turned his attention to the survivors and charged at both of them. The goblin would dash around, slashing at them with his blade or swinging his other weapon. Kipchin slipped past the goblin's swings, slashed them to pieces with his sword, and then charged the big boss. His sword only cut a shallow line, proving he couldn't hurt the much stronger boss with his current power. The boss lunged at them once more, knowing this time it would try a new trick. Fiction was shocked by how fast it moved, yet he could still see its tricks coming. He fought with everything he had to take down the goblin boss, while she used her taunt skill to distract the smaller ones and took all the damage just so she wouldn't be left behind in this dangerous world. Several unnamed guardians tuned into the channel to watch the fight, and even Sia was shocked by how many people were watching. They couldn't help but wonder if a level 8 player was truly ready to take on the dungeon boss during the tutorial. Senna nodded and confirmed that the person standing there was the level 8 player, Kim Hyukin. It was a sight so unbelievable that the Guardian doubted the player was really level 8 and wondered if he was hiding his true power. Senna realized Hyukin wasn't moving like a true level 8 player. Even if you try your hardest, you still won't be able to beat the Goblin Soldier. The mini-boss didn't fall to our weak hits, but Hyukin finally gave out because he was too tired to keep going. The two kept trading hits and dodges until Hyukin yelled for someone to kill them, which shocked the smaller monsters when she suddenly started fighting back, slaughtering each one by herself and racking up experience points one after another. The admin didn't see the danger coming when she reacted that way. While Hyukin hit level 9, healed his wounds, and strengthened his sword, this system worked exactly as he planned to keep them fighting without rest. Pixian asked Suinhua to stay back so she could get ready. If Sun had shared the fight with the Goblin mini-boss while leveling up, she would have grown stronger and healed her wounds and tiredness all at once. Once that happened, Hyukin would surely get his chance to take down the Goblin boss. He would find the Goblin's simplest flaw and strike their exposed necks from behind, and with a little practice watching his own status screen, he finally made it happen. Everything hinged on how many little monsters she could kill, because the more she grew stronger, the better her odds were of beating the dungeon and its boss, right until the boss suddenly struck Hyukin. He knew he had to take the blow with his own body for now. But in the end, he reached level 10, which let him heal up from a serious hit the Goblin boss just landed on him. Kakshin swung his rusted sword at the Goblin boss one more time, and as the blade became stronger, his blow landed with perfect timing to finally strike the boss down. He finally drives his blade home into the soft spot at the back of the Goblin boss's neck. But his old, rusty sword snaps in half right then. The system cheered for them since they beat the Goblin boss, with Kakshin slaying the mini-boss soldier to become the very first player to hunt down and defeat a monster mini-boss. As the system shouts that the tutorial zone's level cap is 10, he finally gains the experience he needs. They sent at least 5 players down into the dungeon to help with that tutorial raid. The system saw the raid as a one-person job. The rules changed, so you can now level up in the tutorial fields without any limits. It also revealed a special requirement that had just been met. Pixian lets Will hug him in excitement after they both beat the monsters, and he knows Sun did an amazing job from start to finish. The hero figures out the hidden boss is hiding in this special condition, but he's stuck wondering what the key item is and knows they'll have to solve this problem sooner or later. Near Guang Woman, other players were defeating a pack of wolves to gain experience and amaze the crowd, with one player even finishing a beast with a single blow. Everyone marveled at how he took down those powerful level 8 wolves with skill that left them all in awe. Even though the players stayed humble while accepting the praise, they said Unium is the strongest in the tutorial, which left Yuyan feeling embarrassed by all the attention. Yu spots Kukjin and Sunwei far away, realizes they are other survivors, and shouts their names. The protagonist quickly realized that the man shouting at them was the legendary player who would later become a key figure in history. From the very start, he couldn't shake the thought that maybe he never had any real talent for the game. He decided that killing that monster boss all by himself proved he wasn't completely useless. Even with Hyukin's glimpse into the future, his odds of joining the dungeon were still only 50-50, yet the nameless observer kept watching him with deep admiration, amazed by the sheer will and focus he showed in battle. Given how things were going, Hyukin still didn't know where his limits lay, especially with so many guardians watching him, including the Lady of Scales who had now taken a keen interest in him. She was a kind guardian who stood by brave players, protecting them and sharing her precious gifts with them. Thanks to her rewards and support, she became a beloved guardian who somehow started paying attention to him. He wondered if traveling with someone made him feel like a hero just for helping an abandoned child. Sia promises Kukjin a reward for his victory over the mini-boss in the dungeon. Kakshin knows the sturdy steel sword is far better than his old rusty one, and Sunwei asks what they should do next. They were racing toward Chang to hunt the wolves of the neutral city, and someone noticed they call them wolves instead of foxes. Kachin says the city wolves are all-powerful beasts of level 7 or higher, with their 9-level leaders towering over the small foxes. Hyukin learned the perfect hunting strategy from others before meeting her, and after she paused to think, they realized that while the first floor Tower D was already safe, the real danger, the massive dungeon on the second floor that would affect the whole territory, was waiting to be cleared. Now that Hyukin can clear it, anyone could make it through the tutorial as long as they stayed in the safe zone. The hero wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He was dreaming of going further. Realizing he had a real talent for the game, making $1 million to support his family seemed like something he could actually achieve. Once he left the dungeon, he couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened, wondering if the new talent he gained was real or just something he'd always had, but now he was determined to use it to his advantage. Then they met Yuyan, who stepped up to ask if there were more survivors. That thought made Cookin realize that after all this time, they finally had their chance to meet, and even though it was their first time seeing each other, he could instantly tell it was Yuan. This was the first king, Yuan, who would later become one of Korea's 8 most famous players. The protagonist answered that they were truly survivors. Yuan pointed out that surviving that time must have been incredibly difficult, which shocked Kakshin since Yuan had managed to save so many people during the tutorial. It was clear from the very first moment that he was truly special on the field. That never changed, not even after traveling back in time. So Yuan proposed they stick together because the more people who remained united, the greater their chance of surviving in that dangerous world. But Hyukin turned down their offer, leaving everyone stunned, and told them he only needed to survive a week in the training zone with just 2 people, which he handled with ease, while Yuan, though disappointed, could only hope for the best for Hyukin and Sunhwa. The others whispered that Hyukin seemed too proud without knowing Yuan's real power, but joining him would boost their odds of staying alive far more than wandering off alone. The protagonist told us that if we ever run into a scary monster, we should shoot its left eye, which left Yudin puzzled, but he still thanked him for the weird advice. Shin turned and walked toward Changshin. Sona wondered if those people would actually survive and be alright. It said most would survive, but Yuan was the strongest, which made the girl feel relieved even though they should have only been thinking about themselves. Even though Yudin and his 10 survivors had planned for a smooth run, the fading memories of the first king warned that a certain event was about to go wrong, plunging them into grave danger where the players who survived the first room would face overwhelming odds and likely die in the second. As the raid timer ran out, Yuvin stood alone as the sole survivor and earned the title of tutorial finisher for clearing the first D-rank tower dungeon. The first king's memories later revealed more secrets, turning the act of sending people into the second-floor dungeon into Yuyan's deepest regret. For now, no one could guarantee they would return safely, though the protagonist hoped a small warning would save lives, even as Hishin stayed away knowing the deadly risk of losing their friends in that dark place. Some noticed that something was waiting just ahead of them. It turned out to be some of the wolves they had been hunting for, so Hukshin thanked her for spotting them from so far away and urged them to chase them down right away. The two rushed at the wolves while Sunwood used her taunt to get in their faces, then swung her baseball bat. She did exactly what she had to do to become perfect bait for the creatures. Chun would keep doing whatever was needed, not just clearing dungeons, but also taking advantage of the fact that no level limits existed anymore inside the tutorial. So long as things stayed the way they were, he would jump at the chance to push past level 10. Chin and Samoa hunted down and killed a few of the wolves who lived peacefully in the city. The girl quickly figured out that swinging the baseball bat felt way better than throwing her bare fists around. Following Hukshin's advice to grab that weapon for battle was a smart move, and while he kept defeating monsters to become the first player to hit level 11, it felt like the perfect result. It was a near impossible feat for others to hit level 10 so fast, yet Hukshin pulled it off and earned the rare First Pioneer title, a mark of honor for those who blaze new trails, which gave him 20% more experience and let him stack it with other titles, leaving him puzzled about what was really happening. He was genuinely shocked by how amazing the requirements for that new title were, even though he'd never heard of it before and found it strange that there was now an option besides the tutorial finisher. Still, it made sense now that the level limit was gone, since no one else could have claimed that title or known about it before. Some wonder if Huan is alright, but he just says they should keep moving on to find more monsters to take down themselves. The administrator just watches them while talking to the guardians. Senna confirmed her suspicions, decided to report what she found, and asked for confirmation, all while looking quite annoyed by her discovery. Inside the hospital safe zone, Hukshin and Samwa got ready to launch their new attack and journey. The protagonist noticed Senna was still angry from the day before, and he was surprised to see her bring up the title he'd received. Gekken admits he got one, but when Senna tries to guess what it is, he refuses to tell her. Even the guardians couldn't guess the player's special title unless he spoke it, leaving her feeling a heavy weight on her shoulders as she searched for a way to find out. Chin knew she was in big trouble, so he stayed silent to let the crowd's curiosity grow instead of spoiling the surprise. Sa wonders if they'll be going to Chien again like last time, and Hyukin nods in agreement since they're heading there again the next day. Meanwhile, near Jim Wong Woman, Yuian gathers everyone following him to make an important announcement. He suggested they might have heard rumors before, but they already knew about a dungeon close by. They didn't realize just how deadly the dungeon could be, but after the world changed, they knew great rewards were waiting for them. Yuan stepped up and said he wants to go into that dungeon. A crowd of others chimed in, saying if he's stepping forward, they want to follow him right along. They want to help him find a safe chance to face the dangers waiting ahead. Yuan shouts for everyone to get excited about charging into the dungeon and to get ready to smash it, leaving the whole group determined to win. Meanwhile, Hukshin, Samhwa, and Xian are still hunting wolves in the neutral zone to gain experience. The girl says they've been taking down those monsters fast ever since, and the protagonist replies that it's because they just kept killing them over and over again. It had been 2 days straight of hunting wolves in the city, and Hyukin had surged to level 12 so fast they could strike down the beast before the monsters could even answer. They had been collecting drops and coins as rewards for slaying monsters, including a mutant wolf's fang that is worth more than 6,000 coins. While things were happening, someone spotted another wolf walking far away in the distance. Hyuin knows he must be the last one standing in that area, so he'll end it all with a single quick strike. But then, suddenly, a strange new alert pops up. They finally met every secret requirement to unlock a special surprise, and now Hooka is feeling nervous. The system told him he'd unlocked a secret prize by reaching level 12, hunting 500 city wolves, and meeting 3 other goals, which was ironic because he'd been trying to steer clear of all that danger. Even with all that trouble, they managed to free the Wolf King Lionthroat from his chains. Chin screams for a place to hide, and the two of them bolt away in a rush. The girl asks what's happening, but the protagonist can't stop to explain, so she just grabs him and runs. Lionthroat steps out of the glowing portal and lets out a terrifying howl that strikes the players and changes their bodies. As they ran away, Suinhwa stumbled and fell because the monster's power made her body weak, and she felt terrible about letting everyone down. Kitchen tells her to hide behind the nearby car, but she grows worried and asks what he plans to do next. Kaikshin yells at her to hurry up. He knew there was a secret reward waiting once he earned it, and though he never expected to meet the powerful Lionthroat monster during the tutorial, its skills were as dangerous as the toughest enemies found on the 2nd floor of Tower D's dungeon, making it look like an even greater threat. Katshin could barely see his own level because he was so low down. He knew those were level 20 or 25 monsters, and definitely not something that should have shown up in the tutorial. He stood frozen, unsure of what to do when the chasm before him was far too wide for a beginner like him to cross. It was already too late to simply turn around and run away again. The hero gulped down the Grand Elixir, which gave him 6 extra points of strength for a short time. To win, he had to use the legendary Explore Jackson's raid tactic to lure the boss right to him. When the boss charged, the protagonist tried to hide as told, but worried about Hukshin fighting alone against the terrifying, invisible level of the monster Henfro. This one looked nothing like the other monsters they had caught before. She guessed what Katshin was planning to do next. The system wouldn't even show you the monster's level because it knew you couldn't beat it yet. The gap between them was at least 10 levels, making it impossible to defeat that lycanthrope. Fiction remembered hearing in a report that low-level players should never run into monsters like that. Above all, the most dangerous beasts were gigantic yet shockingly quick, so your only hope was to find yourself in a weak zone. That way, you could stay out of trouble as much as possible, but if a fight was unavoidable and you needed to survive, Chin knew that using the high-grade lubricant from his stash on his sword or other surfaces would let him jump right into the first attack on a lycan's throat. Kuchin slipped right under the attack, trusting his gut to get away. The next blow would slide smoothly toward him, and he knew exactly when and where to move by watching how those muscles flexed and tightened. Hukshin glanced at the shadows beneath his feet and tossed the slippery stuff onto the ground. The lycanthropes slipped on the ground, giving the protagonist a chance to rush forward and knock them out in one move, all because the special drink had made him stronger than ever. The report warned to use lyanthrobes against themselves by doing anything possible to weaken them, even pushing them into the water. That was exactly what Hyukin did. He shoved it right into the water. The monster thrashed wildly inside, shrinking fast, which left Samo completely stunned by the sudden turn of events. The hero explained that a water-drenched lycanthrope swells then shrinks, making it just like the city wolves they'd fought, which made Suinhwa wonder if Hyukin had once mastered a hidden martial art. He explained he never had the time because he was always studying for exams, but she was still amazed that he fought so well, taking down that boss with just one move like something out of a movie. Chin believed that if he were truly skilled, he wouldn't have to rely on cheap tricks. The lycan's throat screamed in the water until Hyukichin cut it down with his sword, killing the beast and pushing his own power up to level 13. The hero felt a wave of relief as the fight ended far too easily, only to be shocked when his level shot up again after slaying the hidden boss. Not only that, but he kept climbing the ranks, moving from level 14 straight up to 15. He hunted down the hidden special monster and earned a hidden special reward, including the title Excellent Hunter, which left Hyukin shocked by the sheer number of gifts he received. The Nameless Guardian was so impressed by his clever plans that he dropped 1,200 coins as a reward, and the Lady of Scales was equally touched by how much he cared for his companion, handing over an extra 700 coins, while the brave lion just snorted in frustration at the sneaky ways to win, leaving Hukshin to marvel at how much the Guardians had donated for such a small achievement. Yet he knew the new system rewards he'd earned would be a huge help as he hit level 15 in the tutorial and unlocked fresh features. So he called for Senna, who appeared right away. It was strange because she looked like she had been sitting there waiting for that phone call for a long time. Signia told us that Hyun had hit level 15, so she started explaining how the item shop was finally open for us. Even though he thought he couldn't buy special items until he reached level 15, the store opened too soon while he was still in the beginner's area, so he could only spend his coins on 4 special things that worked just there. The hatchlings are small, but that's normal since they're still in the tutorial, and with 4 items and nearly 8,000 coins from defeating monsters, the protagonist thinks he could buy plenty of potions until Sia interrupts to ask if he has a real name. Chin is so confused about what she's trying to learn that she asks why he should even tell her something like that. Sia gets frustrated, saying she just wasn't curious at first, then asks if he isn't going to check out the other rewards that come with the Excellent Hunter title. Ketchin replies that once he's done at the item shop, he'll check it out himself, since that's something he likes to handle on his own without needing her help. He quickly decided to skip the detailed checks and just look at the status window, keeping his mystery intact while realizing Xenia must be a total rookie for suggesting such things without thinking, especially since that special Excellent Hunter title from the tutorial gave him a big damage boost, faster speed, a powerful attack skill, and worked great on the low-level monsters he would face. Kukshin shouts for everyone to get ready, because they're about to charge up the stairs and storm the 2nd floor of Tower D. He asks if she means the old tutorial dungeon where they hunted down a goblin, and when she agrees, she's shocked because Hyukin had warned them that the 2nd floor was especially dangerous. The protagonist nodded in agreement, realizing that someone waiting upstairs was far deadlier than the goblin soldier they had just fought. Meanwhile, UIM's team was in deep trouble with people dying on the 2nd floor, leaving him stuck in a dangerous mess. He stared into the dark, lost trying to figure out what terrible beast he'd faced and how on earth he could ever hope to defeat something so impossible. Though Yuvin was badly hurt, he refused to quit because stepping back now would mean everything was lost. And he realizes that no matter how many times he strikes the monster, it won't budge, leaving him wondering if there is any other way to win. All it takes is one more powerful blow right back to snap his bones. He stared in shock as that monster stood completely unharmed after taking all those hits. It felt like he was punching a wall all by himself, and if he kept going he'd just die, so he wondered if there was truly no way to win. Suddenly, Yunnan recalled the words Kyukin had spoken to him long ago, and first thought the idea of getting hit in the eye was just a silly warning that made no sense. Before he could react, Yuan dodges the monster's first blow but gets crushed by its left fist, sending him flying across the ground and spitting blood. He was stuck in a tough spot with no chance of winning that fight, and it looked like it was all over. The system announced that new players were rushing into the dungeon, leaving everyone confused, until Kayak and Sam walked right into the boss zone, prompting the system to reveal there was no limit on how many people could join the fight. The hero just sighed, noting that things ended up exactly as expected once more, even though the floor boss was still a mysterious magic troll whose power level remained unknown. The crowd was a mix of the wounded and the lifeless, yet Yuan was stunned to see that many others had walked into that dungeon only to pass out right away. Several people were hurt but still alive, while Yuan lay on the ground, clearly out cold. He reached into his bag, grabbed a few weak potions, and gave them to the injured people to help them feel better. A man urged them to run fast, warning that they would get trapped in the boss zone on that floor once 10 seconds were up. They would only end up dead if they stayed in the monster's territory. So Yukshin told Suinhua to grab the potions and hand them out to the survivors, even the man who had begged him to run. The hero told her that while he fought, anyone who had been hit should stay down and not move. The man was so shocked he yelled, "Didn't you hear me say to get out of here right now?" They would only lose more people and end up dead, but the protagonist ignored the warning, trusting his memory that the 2nd floor boss of D-Tower was a monster he knew better than anyone. Just like the Lycanthrope boss with its hidden level and scary red name. These trolls were famous for being tough to kill, because they had so much life and could take a beating. Troll's magic surged through the creature, turning it into a nearly unbreakable giant that could only be hurt by steel, a threat too great for anyone but UDM to face, leaving Kuchin alone and helpless at that critical moment. As a troll lunged at him, a wounded comrade shouted a warning, allowing Chin to slip past the beast's slow, heavy swings. There was no plan that could ever beat that troll boss. All Hyken could do was stand his ground, remembering how the first king he knew won by relentlessly attacking the tutorial monster before it could ever recover, earning him the title of tutorial finisher. Samu worried about Hyukshin, while the wounded man stared in awe at how someone could still stand up to fight such a terrifying beast. The system told Hukshin that his special title was giving him bonus power to help him win the battle. By drinking potions to heal his fatigue, Hikken could stay agile enough to dodge the troll's strikes and keep hitting it until the giant beast finally fell. It was a long fight where both sides had to keep going until one could no longer stand. As Hukshin fought, everyone watching was completely amazed. They worried how much longer the protagonist could hold out like that, especially since Hikken, who just showed up to help them in the dungeon, had only been there for about an hour. It was mind-blowing that someone could fight by themselves for so long, and even though everyone thought Yuian was the greatest genius, Hikken was actually even better. The hero reached into his pack and grabbed another snack to stay strong for the fight. Thinking he had finally stood up to that magical troll head-on, he realized how tough the fight was after nearly 5 hours of battling. But just as the boss still stood strong, the system suddenly announced that its healing power had finally run out. Even the boss of the floor was finally reaching his breaking point. The hero knew his old self would never have guessed a fight could be this tough. The past was gone, and Kim Kukshin the student had faded away, leaving only Kukshin the player, who now had about 15 minutes to close out the match. With just a bit more push, he could win that fight. After the brave Lion King gave him a special gift, Kepchin stood there completely confused. He possessed a special talent called superb over-human strength that let him double his attack power. Chin stood frozen, wondering how all of that could have happened so fast. Before he could even react, his attack hit the enemy with twice the force he expected, instantly wiping out all his careful plans. That messed up all of Hukuin's plans and left him so mad at what the brave Lion King decided to do. People everywhere are shocked that Kukin nearly wiped out the boss all by himself. Hushin is sure that the brave Lion King made that choice on purpose. If he ever got a chance to kill the Guardians, that one would be his very first target. His plan to beat the troll fell apart, so he had to run, but then someone woke Yuan up to help him. But the player gets up, worried about the monster he just fought. Sunless points out that the monster is right there, but Shin is the one fighting it. This shocks UV, for the trolls suddenly start glowing with a strange new energy. Just when you think you've got the boss in your sights, someone shoots an arrow right at his forehead and completely catches you off guard. The shooter asks if the shot worked and if the monster is finally dead. The man laughed at himself and told Queen to run, because he knew he couldn't save the man who had just shot the troll. The man is left scratching his head, until the system suddenly announces that the troll boss's mind has been locked away. And so, it has switched into its berserker mode. Jun screams for someone to run right, as the alert confirms that the boss is unconscious and their dangerous zone has vanished. Everyone starts running, and someone asks where to go, so Yakshin says to the escalators, where 15 people used to wait their turn, but now can all move at once. While Yuian stares in shock at the terrifying sight, the boss kills the troll who just fired the arrow with a simple flick of his hand. As Hyukin and the others run away, the hero realizes it's all his own fault. In the end, everything unfolded exactly as the Guardians had planned and enjoyed. Hyukin felt guilty that players' choices would always get in the way, and he realized he should have planned better from the beginning. As the magic troll switched into its fierce berserker form, the monster's forbidden zone vanished and spread beyond the tower's second floor, leaving the underground as the only safe haven. So Hutchin told Sunhwa to take the emergency stairs down there, and when she asked exactly where they were going, he explained they needed to reach the basement of the second floor. Now that spot was a new safe haven they could call their own. But before they could even drop down, Chin spots the troll boss coming right at them. That must mean everyone else who was in the second floor boss room is dead. Chin ducks just in time to escape the strike, then leaps off the stairs before the attack lands. Hishin fought hard to stay calm, knowing that if the troll caught them, things would only get much worse. For now, they had managed to dodge it, but he was worried because the second floor was farther away than expected, and soon they finally spotted the door that would lead to the emergency exit. The system sees the danger, matches the tutorial, and marks it as a special event, waking up his hidden power. Yakshin knows the floor boss is coming even without turning his head. Suddenly, his natural sixth sense is forced awake. As the boss charges in and the hero thinks he's about to die, Issei steps up to take the hit instead. While running, Sama feared for Kayakin's life and knew they were all doomed at this speed. So even though she couldn't stop the attack, she stepped forward to take the hit herself just to make sure the hero lived. After praising Samwa's bravery, the Lady of Scales gives her the platinum shield to block the troll's attack. But when Samwa throws herself in front of Hutchin to take the hit, the system warns that the shield will shatter and the force will transfer directly to her body. Hin realizes his mistake has caused someone to get hurt, so he immediately pulls them out of the boss's way. He is already shocked by her new power, but he is even more stunned when she faints right after using that platinum shield. Huchin grabs her, and they start running again to escape the troll's attack. He fought to keep his nerves under control as they crept closer to the safe zone, knowing they only had to push through that glass door to make it. The moment he crashes through the glass, a wave of relief washes over him because the safe zone in Tower D is now active, which means the floor boss can't get through. Where the troll tries to pass, Ho Chin relaxes because it fails to reach them. Yet there must be some monsters capable of ignoring safe zones and slipping right through. Even when going crazy, a troll couldn't do that. Hyukin wakes Suinhwa to find she has hurt her arm after trying to stop the troll's attack, all by herself. He mixes up a special potion to give her back her strength. He never figured out when she'd picked up that trick, but it saved his life by stopping a fatal blow from cracking his brain and ending everything. Meanwhile, the troll kept pounding on the safe zone's door and letting out a loud scream. The protagonist got so mad he just told the thing to leave and die already. But since the berserker was barely holding on, it only exploded into pieces right then, splattering blood everywhere to prove it was finally dead. The system chirps that the magic troll has been spotted by a nearly level 20 player, so Senna walks right up to them again. She tells Shachin that he gets to keep all the treasure from the dungeon. Once the boss of the tutorial zone falls, the whole area will be torn down. She finally finished her quest. The system tells us that the next challenge will be decided by how many survivors are left. They found 5,087 survivors in the zone, which made the challenge easy. Chin noticed the count of survivors was exactly the same as the last time he looked. Even though both he and the other had survived, he couldn't understand why the numbers stayed the same until the system finally announced that the tutorial rewards were about to start. So the big prize pool gets shared out, along with special perks like a 1,000 coin reward, a starter defense kit, and the chance for players to prove they're worthy of a spot. The administrator would hand out the rewards, lift the level limit, and give the tutorial finisher title to anyone who cleared the empty zone. So the title goes to the survivor on the second floor of Tower D, Su Yugen, and gets added to the Hall of Fame, while Chin remembers that Yunim was the only one who made it through the last round, but he puts that aside to talk to Senna about the trade she mentioned earlier and offers to negotiate with her. He was ready to do anything to save that person's life. So he asked her to boost his shop rank right away. Even though Simiae pointed out it would naturally get better after the tutorial, yet he seemed too eager to make a deal when he could just buy potions. A player could sign a deal with the middle manager. As long as the contract rules were followed, the Guardian could peek at the target player through their helper. The more fun the player brings to the game through that deal, the bigger the reward for the middle manager. The protagonist knew the trouble between the Guardians and administrators all too well, and with the potions he'd gathered, he figured a player like him had to be worth a fortune. No matter what, he was just trying to give someone more time to live. After all, he didn't need a grand excuse because she had already saved his life from the troll when he surely would have died without her blocking the attack. Kuchin knew he owed his life to Suinhwa, so he prayed her heart would beat again after all the potions he gave her. Suddenly, Sanwo wakes up in a daze to discover she's alive, and Hakshin confirms her survival, calling it a true miracle. She glances at the pile of potions beside her and recalls Hyukin's warning that he'd leave her behind if she ever slowed him down in a dungeon. But she paused to answer, knowing she could barely dodge that last strike, and it would feel like a waste to leave her behind after all they had been through. Samo starts crying from relief, finally knowing he didn't leave her behind. Hyukin asks Xenia to start figuring out the rewards for each person, and she says yes, but the main character immediately asks if they can finally upgrade his shop and make their deal happen, which really makes her annoyed. The protagonist figured that to get the system to see the contract, she needed a paper proof, a mistake that just showed Kakshin once more that she was totally new to her job. Hukshin explains that he's only mentioning this because she was the one who didn't prepare the contract, and it wasn't his fault at all that she was so careless. He just tells her to look at the rewards she's already earned. Senia starts with Hyukin's reward, showing off everything he earned at the end of the tutorial on the big screens, which leaves him feeling quite satisfied. After 7 days of the tutorial finally ended, the surviving players earned their own special rewards based on what they did. Sure, his amazing rewards were just impossible for someone who didn't know the right tricks from the very start. Thanks to his future knowledge, the tutorial he once knew had changed completely. Hakshin realized the tutorial rewards must be different for what he remembered until he earned 3 more ability points. And he also spotted that his title had changed too. SA says the Excellent Hunter title has been upgraded to Excellent Player, and asks if he wants to see it, but Chin insists on checking it himself, which only makes Senna more annoyed. The system explains that the Excellent Player title is a special reward from the tutorial that gets better after you defeat the boss and hunt every target, giving you 20% more damage, 20% faster movement, a new special attack, a 10% boost to experience, and even a small chance for enemies to accidentally ignore your hits. The protagonist was shocked to find that earning the title of Excellent Hunter wasn't even enough to satisfy him. But with the new title's upgrades, he got way more rewards than before and started wondering if it was right to get something so good just from the tutorial, while the game's conditions all made perfect sense. Even though the new player was still weaker than the Lion Throat boss, he had already reached level 10 by hunting it, so the special title change made some sense, even if it was normally impossible to earn. It was amazing to find a secret title like that, but it didn't even compare to the big surprise he got at the very end. That was the moment his sixth senses and deadly powers merged perfectly, unlocking the secret to fusion. When he combined the tutorial bonus with his natural talent, he earned the title of Excellent Player, and later, by mixing the beta opening bonus with his innate ability, he gained the Calm Observer's Eye skill. The protagonist recalls that very few records existed about these fusions, and even the few who had witnessed them knew almost nothing about them. Usually, only players who had climbed to secret top levels could find ways to use this boosting trick. It felt like there was always some new secret about the tutorial that he hadn't figured out yet. Putting that behind him, he faced a tough decision. The special power he earned from fighting the troll could be mixed with his starting gift of the Calm Observer's Eye, or the tutorial bonus of being an excellent player. He decided to mix his two new powers together and started wondering if they would actually work. Then he is startled when a sharp pain suddenly hits him. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst right out his chest. Almost right away, worry creeps in for Kepchen as the system laments that the fusion process caused such fierce pain that if he couldn't take it, he would die, and the agony was so severe it made him cough up blood, which makes Hyukin furious since the system never warned him about that risk before. Now, it was too late, and the protagonist was stuck paying the price for fusing their powers. Seeing that terrifying scene, someone is so scared they nearly pass out, begging for it to stop, but then the system declares the fusion a success and reveals the brand new skill, Eye of Perception. But Hyukin passes out from the heavy blood loss and intense pain. He jolts awake in a strange new place, lost and unsure if what he just saw was real or if he's even still alive. He thinks he heard an alarm go off. As he turns his head to the side, he sees a woman. It was Kamayang, his own sister. Yakshin was surprised to see a system window analyzing her, revealing that she felt happy and relieved, yet also worried. Yet Yakin is stunned, because Ayang looks exactly like he did 7 years ago, with not a single change. Aya asks why it took a whole week for him to come back after going out to study. She wondered if he truly cared about how much she and her mom had worried over everything during all that time. Without waiting for a reply, Ayang turns and walks out, declaring that as long as he's still alive, everything's okay. This makes him believe she's remained the same tough person she always was, even after 10 years. Even though his sister walked out of the room, he could still hear her talking outside, thanks to the special power inside him that started working the moment he fainted. Outside, he catches her whispering that Hin should just die already, since his endless worry is making her sick. The protagonist finally understands why he could hear his sister whining from outside. He silently wished he hadn't caused her to cry like that. He recalls arguing with her in the past, pleading for her to stop working in the factory so they could care for their mother together and live as a true family. At that very moment, the hero wished he could make it happen. In this new life, he could still see his mother alive and well. She went to visit him in the hospital, and Suinhua rushed over the moment she heard he had woken up. She dives into his arms, sobbing with happiness that he's still alive. Action let out a sigh, knowing he had truly gone back to the past. After 7 brutal days in the tutorial where most people died, he finally survived the nightmare. Now, after surviving hell and learning skills he never dreamed of, this time, as the portal opened in the world, Hukshin was ready to make things different. A month went by since the big disaster hit Zhang'o. News reports kept repeating the shocking fact that only 5,000 people survived out of 150,000. Even though the event called the tutorial had ended a month ago, the fear and sadness were still fresh in everyone's minds. Even as reporters spoke with deep sadness about the huge losses, many people still felt crushed by the despair of losing their friends, families, and loved ones. For this report, they brought along a special guest whose job it was to help many people get to safety. The reporter noted that eyewitnesses said Yu Yayan saved many lives in the tutorial by using his incredible strength to punch away monsters like goblins and wolves from the neutral city. He rescued several people from certain death, and the reporter even noted that he earned that famous title because of his heroic deeds, wondering what he thought of it. Yin falls quiet as he thinks of Ho Chin, then answers that he's just been lucky. In the end, the real heroes were others, so reporter said Yuyan's own words were humble, even though the public still believes Yuyan himself was the true hero who finished the great tutorial. But Yuan knew he wasn't being humble at all. After all, the There were Hutchin and others, but he couldn't deny that Hyun was in a league of his own, having taken down the floor boss all by himself. Yuan knows he might have died without Hutchin's help, and while he hasn't checked for himself yet, he's sure the other player must still be alive. At the very least, he hopes so, because he needs to pay back the favor from that day. Meanwhile, our hero stood beside a friend right at the edge of a new gateway, knowing it would open at SEU Station on June 7th. The crowd runs away in a panic, knowing monsters are coming out, yet Suinhwa asks if they should still go in. The system insists that only players may pass through the portal, and has already chosen at least 7 to step inside. Kit nods, knowing they have to step into that dungeon. As both of them step inside, the system announces that they have entered the SU Station dungeon. They open channel 19 and 27 so the Guardians could watch along with us. The protagonist recalled that once people mastered clearing dungeons, even the toughest rank challenges in the tower would become simple, turning those small portals into easy training grounds. Chin asks if she still remembers what he told her before they entered, and when she says yes, he confirms that they are about to move deeper into the dungeon. Senna, acting just as an intermediary messenger, appear to tell him that at least 7 others have been recommended for that dungeon. The manual warns that the SO Station dungeon needs a small team of players to clear it. Attempting to take down that threat with only 2 people was a death sentence. Sania begs Hitchens to wait until he has gathered enough people before leaving the safe zone, but he ignores her and walks right into the dungeon anyway, ready to show her exactly how to survive in this world just as he promised he would. While Yin got yelled at in Guido's money district for how he left, he had just become so famous that people were already asking him for interviews and TV appearances. Yuan apologizes and explains that he's now planning a completely new path. The company owner insisted his firm was honest and nothing like the shady businesses in the financial district, but he looked visibly frustrated and kicked the man out after losing Yuan. As Yuan steps outside, he realizes the world has changed so much since that day a month ago. Even though they had left the training area, small monsters like slimes still roamed the streets, and players who grabbed items quickly became valuable, turning to shop deals to survive while realizing that investing in people was the fastest way to change the world. While he was lost in thought, he suddenly heard a couple arguing that they must run away right now because they'd just heard a dungeon open at Su Station, the very same kind they had seen before in Zhong'o. Suddenly, Neptune shows up to talk to Yuan and tells him that the brand new dungeon at Su Station is finally open, inviting him to step inside as the famous finisher of the tutorial, since this is the very first one to appear. The guide insisted on gathering at least 7 players before venturing in, but he suddenly fell silent the moment Neptune noticed that 2 adventurers had already rushed into the dungeon. So he went on to say that for now, it's okay, explaining that the system creates dungeons that will blow up if not cleared in time, which lets monsters escape into the real world, meaning only players can rush in to save them before the clock runs out. Back in the station's dungeon, as someone starts talking about the strange new dungeon that appeared, Kaiken cuts them off with a warning to watch where they step. The dark, damp cave that opened inside Su Station was so cold and slippery that they had to watch their step carefully or they'd fall. He turned on his perception eye skill, assuming the dungeon's halfway point meant it was safe enough, though he knew Chin and Suinhwa would still struggle if anything dangerous appeared. The protagonist is blown away by Sunu's status window, which shows she hit level 15 incredibly fast despite the few monsters since the dungeon opened, proving Hukshin that this 14-year-old girl has been training hard even though she's already level 14. Soon, they spot a divider blocking the path they're walking down. They finally reach the big part of the story known as the 7 Fort Paths. 7 doors led to 7 wild places, and each path held its own treasure, which is why the dungeon at Su Station was best tackled by a team of 7. Even after passing through the 7 magical gates at the entrance, each person would still need to be at least level 10. No matter which way they went, if there were only the 2 of them, they would both die. At least that's what Hutchin figured was going through their minds as she watched them standing before the many splits. The protagonist didn't hesitate to tell her to wait while he returned, and he even agreed easily with what Hyken said. He walked down a path past a fork, which made the dungeon notice him and open the fight-filled way. Even with the new dungeon waking up, Hipchun felt no fear about what was coming next. He pushed deeper into the Su Station dungeon, driven by his eagerness to uncover what else lay hidden within. To clear that dungeon, they had to beat every single path because each one gave a unique reward, and they needed all 7 of them to finish. But as soon as a player stepped onto a path in the dungeon, the challenge instantly jumped to match 7 people. If they entered the Nele path, they would never complete.